Gunnery Sergeant McGrortyHunter. He hails from Fremont, California, enlisted in the United States Marine Corps in 2011 as a data specialist. Throughout his illustrious career, he has been forward deployed in numerous combat environments across multiple combat commands except for Eurocom and Southcom. Currently, he serves as an instructor at the Marine Corps University over at the Staff Academy, molding, shaping, and leading our future staff and COs. We are honored to have you tonight, Gunnery Sergeant. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, may I please present Gunnery Sergeant McGrortyHunter.
I want to start off by saying happy birthday and thank you for all the families and friends that came out here to spend this evening with us and with your Marines. As your company commander said, I teach at the Staff Non-Commissioned Officer Academy, faculty advisor down there. Usually when I get into a conversation with people outside of the military realm, when I tell them that, the very next question that follows is, so what exactly does that mean? And I give them the elevator pitch that I teach, lead, mentor, and educate staff non-commissioned officers and non-commissioned officers in the profession of arms. I usually leave them with a simple sentiment though. I'm a professional storyteller for the Marine Corps. And what I want to do tonight is I want to share what I think is a golden rule for leadership, not only within this organization, but within life. That if you want to be a successful leader, invest in yourself in becoming a successful storyteller. And so what I want to do is I want to pull on that thread a little bit, and I want to share a few of the stories that I've used and I've come back to year after year in different situations to share values with the Marines that I teach. I want to paint a simple narrative that talks about who we are and who we need to be. Now, I figured out who we are in a cauldron of fire when I was a young staff sergeant in 2017. I was newly promoted. My girlfriend and I, we were living in Southern California, and we decided we wanted to get away for a weekend. So I took a little bit of leave, and we decided we were going to go out to Las Vegas, Nevada. We'd done it before, figured that's a good place to go. So we went out for a weekend in Vegas. And instead of going to the clubs and going to the casinos like we typically would, we decided we were going to attend a concert because we're big country fans. And we went out to this country concert, and for 3 days we were surrounded by 22,000 other people that were enjoying this concert and this festival with us. It was amazing. And on the final night of the concert, the headlining act was Jason Aldean, so my girlfriend and I, we decided let's get to the very front of the stage and let's enjoy this closing act. And so we diligently worked to get to the front of the stage, about 20 yards away from the main stage, on the right-hand side, closest to the Las Vegas Boulevard. And Jason Aldean was starting on his third to final song. It was 10:05 p.m., Sunday, October 1st, 2017. And in that corner of America, life was great. And then everything changed. As Jason Aldean started his song, he got into that first line, and a series of cracks whipped through the air that cut through the naturally noisy atmosphere of the Las Vegas Boulevard. And for a second, everything paused, but only for a second. And in that second, we heard the murmurings in the crowd. Was that gunshots? Was that the speakers cracking? Was that fireworks? Everybody started to murmur, but then everything picked back up. And I've been in the Marine Corps long enough at this time to know what gunshots sounded like, and it didn't really sound like gunshots. Something sounded off. And so in my mind, I'm thinking maybe this is fireworks. Maybe it was fireworks on the strip that somebody lit off, or maybe there was a drive-by on the strip. But everything picked back up. Jason Aldean continued to sing. The drummer kept on beating the drum. The guitarist strummed his chords. And about 5 seconds later, reality set in when the next series of cracks came through the air. Crack, 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 crack. In succession, it was automatic. It was sustained, and in my mind, I knew at that point in time that we were in a very, very dangerous position. I grabbed my girlfriend's hand and we oriented towards the back of the stage, basically towards an exit that I knew was about 350 yards to our rear. And at that same time, a lady that was about 10 feet in front of us yelled out, "My friend's been shot in the arm," and we saw the Las Vegas police start to run into the crowd. And we started to push through the crowd to try and make it to this exit that was about 350 yards away. And about 5 seconds later, the next succession of gunfire came and ripped through the crowd. And when that next succession came, everybody collapsed at the same time. And when thousands of people collapse in a succession like a domino effect, you collapse whether you want to or not under the crushing weight of their bodies. And I'll spare you the details of what happens in the next 90 seconds while my girlfriend and I are trapped inside that venue and 500 rounds are shot into the crowd around us, because what I want to tell you about is what happens when we make our escape. We were able to make our escape, and we were able to get out to the back streets after that 350-yard dash through a hail of gunfire. And My girlfriend is pleading with me. She's pulling on my arm and she's telling me to slow down so she can catch her breath. And so I slow down to a fast walk, and when I do that, I pull out my phone and I call my grandparents who live in the neighboring town of Henderson, Nevada. And I get on the phone with my grandpa and I say, Grandpa, there's been a terrorist attack. I need you to come down to the strip and pick us up. I'm gonna drop my location on the iPhone. And I hang up. It's a 10-second phone call. But in that 10 seconds, my girlfriend spots a woman who's off to our side that's screaming through her phone, having a panic attack and having an asthma attack. And she grabs her by the arm and she says, "Are you alone?" The woman screams back that she is. My girlfriend says, "Come with us. My boyfriend's a Marine. He'll get us out of here." The woman screams back through the phone to her husband. She says, "Honey, I found a Marine. I'm going with him. I love you. Goodbye." Now, if you're a husband, the last thing you want to hear from your wife is that she found a Marine and she's leaving. But in this situation, it worked out, right? And so we all lashed arms, and for about 150 more yards, we ran down the street until I could find a place where we could put the women. And I found a scrap pile of scrap wood, scrap metal, things like that, and I positioned the women behind it, and I positioned myself behind it in an area where I could look out and I could see if there's any incoming threats. And as that happened, the minutes start to roll by, and more people start to escape the venue. And they're starting to scream into this parking lot that we're hiding in. They're hiding under cars, they're hiding behind bushes, and all this time I'm trying to keep everybody silent. I'm trying to tell people, hey, keep your voices down, turn down the lights on your cell phones, anything that I could do to make sure that they didn't give away our position. And it's at this time that two more women stroll up to our position. One is carrying the other, and they're screaming and crying. One of them is crying that she has a broken leg. So we grab these two young women, we put them behind this scrap pile of metal and wood with us, and my girlfriend automatically turns to calming them down again with that same sentiment. She says, "It's gonna be okay, my boyfriend's a Marine, just listen to him and he'll get us out of here." And it brings him a moment of reprieve. And all this time I'm coordinating with my grandfather, I'm telling him where we're at, I'm trying to figure out where his location is, and I'm figuring out what's our next move. And at this time I figure out we're gonna have to move because the Las Vegas police, they're gonna be setting up some kind of cordon, some kind of area where they're gonna be engaging the gunmen. And we have to get outside of that cordon if we wanna meet up with my grandparents and get out of there. And so I tell the women, I look at them, I say, "Get ready, we need to move." And immediately the shock comes back into their faces because their perceived safety of being behind this pile of wood, and they are now realizing that they have to expose themselves to the gunfire again. And it's at that moment that the girl without the injured leg, she looks at me and she grabs me and she says, "Are you really a Marine? Are you really?" And in my head, I'm thinking, "Lady, why does it even matter? We need to go, we need to move." But I just pull out my phone and I flash my home screen to her, and on the background is a picture of my girlfriend and me in my blues at my friend's wedding. She immediately sees that, she turns to her friend and she says, "Oh my God, he really is a Marine, it's gonna be okay." We grab the girl with the injured leg, sling her arm over my shoulder, my girlfriend grabs her other side, and we make our final escape to end our night of terror. Now in the months following that event, I had a lot of time to reflect on that event. And one of the things that I continue to come back to time after time was that simple statement. And the first thing that I latched onto was who said it, because it was my girlfriend, and we had been dating for about 6 months at the time. My girlfriend had no family in the military, no connection to the Marine Corps at all, barely knew what I did in the Marine Corps. Yet that was a sentiment that she shared, unprovoked, on her own, to try and gain the compliance of these terrified women. And then I thought about how that had affected the women, because we've stayed in contact with all of them throughout the years as well, and none of them have any contacts with the military, no connection to the Marine Corps either. Yet in that moment, that statement gained their consent to listen to any of the orders that I gave them, and they put their lives in my hand. Finally, I thought about myself at that point, because I thought about if I were to pick a starting lineup of who I want to take into a situation like that, I don't think that I would have made the cut for the first draft. At the time, I was 24 years old, I was very young, I was a newly promoted staff sergeant, I had never been to combat, I had never been on a full-length deployment at all. I was a cyber networking chief. I'm not an infantryman on the front line pulling the trigger. I set up computer networks and I set up satellites. I don't think I would have made the first cut on who you want to take in that situation. But none of that mattered in that moment. And none of it mattered to those women, because all that mattered in that moment was that they had found a United States Marine, and that meant something to them. What I want to share with you tonight is that our reputation, it precedes us. And it doesn't matter what your own West is. It precedes you no matter what. That reputation was earned by the generations of Marines who would go off and fight in the wheat fields of France at places like Delawood and the Argonne. That reputation was earned by the greatest generation of Marines who would go off and fight in islands that nobody had ever heard of. Islands like Tarawa, Guadalcanal, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. The American populace attributes the same characteristics to you all as the Marines that would go and fight in places like Busan, who would cut off the North Koreans at Incheon, and who would fight against tens of thousands of Chinese in a place called the Chosin Reservoir. They see the same values and characteristics in you as the Marines who would fight for 70 plus days of sustained combat on a hill called Kaesong and then go down and fight in the streets of Hue City. And no matter if you were there or not, they see the same qualities in you as the Marines who would clear street to street in Fallujah and walk point in the IED-ridden streets of Afghanistan. It's very hard for some of us to liken ourselves to those people that we see as our heroes and see that we have the same characteristics. We hold them on such a high pedestal. What you have to understand is that you are absolutely the same type of person. Because every single one of those people that we look at as our heroes were just ordinary men and women who raised their right hand and swore to serve something bigger than themselves. They're ordinary men and women who were thrust into extraordinary circumstances. John McCain, our late senator, he tells a story about ordinary men in extraordinary circumstances. And for those that don't know, John McCain, before he entered politics, was a naval aviator. And in 1967, he was flying his A-4 Skyhawk on a bombing run over North Vietnam when he was shot down during Operation Rolling Thunder. And in the first few years of the war, the prisoners in the Hanoi Hilton where he was captured at, they were stuck in solitary confinement to not see another American for years on end. But political pressure later on in the war made it so that they lived in communal cells. So John McCain tells a story about one of his cellmates, a man by the name of Mike Christian, who was one of his 20 cellmates that he lived with. He said that over the course of a few months, Mike had gathered these small scraps of white cloth from a sewer drain that was coming through the camp. And then he also got his hands on a red handkerchief. And over the course of about a month, he got a bamboo needle that he fashioned out of a piece of bamboo inside their cell. And he sewed a small American flag to the inside of his blue prison jumpsuit. And every single night, before the prisoners would drink their soup, which was their dinner, they would hang Mike's blouse in the corner of the room, and they would recite the Pledge of Allegiance. Now, for the average everyday American, reciting the Pledge of Allegiance isn't probably the highlight of your day, but for these men, it absolutely was. The prison guards figured out that Mike had this American flag fashioned to the inside of his coat. They came in one night, they ripped his blouse off, they drugged Mike outside of the cell, and for the next 2 hours, they viciously beat him. At the end of that beating, they drug him back inside, they placed him down in the middle of the cell, they walked out, all the prisoners flocked to him, they picked him up, they took him back to his part of the cell where he typically slept. They got him cleaned up, and they got him settled for the night, and then everybody went back to sleep. John McCain remembers that night that he was having a really tough time falling back to sleep. He was kind of tossing and turning, and after about an hour, he said that he opened his eyes, and off in the corner of the room, under one of the dimly lit lights that shone 24 hours a day inside that cell, was Mike Christian, while everybody else was asleep, through swollen shut eyes with his bamboo needle, sewing another American flag. Everybody in this room that is wearing this uniform, you are cut from the same cloth. The same red American blood pumps through your veins as somebody like Mike Christian, who would survive 7.5 years in captivity in North Vietnam. It's important that you understand that, because that grit, that determination, that courage, that honor, all of those things that was demanded of our previous generations may be demanded of you as well. The last story that I want to close with is, how do we prepare for that? And I want to share a story about a man who many of us probably know and probably revere to some regards, but a story that I don't think many of you have ever heard before. So in 2003, General Mattis was the commanding general of the 1st Marine Division during the march into Baghdad, during the invasion of Iraq. And as a division commanding general, you can imagine he has to make a lot of important decisions. Decisions that would weigh the lives of his Marines, that would weigh the lives of the civilian populace that they interacted with every single day, and certainly that would weigh the lives of the enemy that they were looking to defeat on the battlefield. Well, as you can also imagine, not every plan in combat actually goes to plan. Things go wrong. Well, one of these operations that General Mattis had authorized to happen, it went so wrong that an investigation was launched against General Mattis and his unit. Investigators came out and they started to ask questions to the people that were involved in the planning of this. They questioned the operations officer that briefed General Mattis. They questioned the operations chief who carried out the mission. And they asked them all a similar line of questions, and one of those questions was, after you briefed General Mattis on this operation, how long did it take for him to authorize it and say it's a go? Their answer, they said it took them only about 30 seconds. And these investigators were kind of shocked, they were kind of taken aback, because in their minds they're thinking, how can somebody make such an important decision about such an important operation and weigh all the risks in a period of only 30 seconds? So they went and they interviewed General Mattis, and they asked him the same question. They said, sir, we've interviewed your staff, and from what we've been able to gather, it only took you 30 seconds to authorize this mission. Is that true? General Mattis' response? He said, it took me 30 years. He said, it took me 30 years to make that 30-second decision. And what General Mattis was alluding to was that it was everything that he had done up until that moment where he's the commanding general of the 1st Marine Division during the invasion of Iraq that had allowed him to make that quick, timely, decisive decision when the moment mattered with confidence. It was his time as a battalion commander in the Gulf War. It was his time as a young second lieutenant post-Vietnam. It was all the books that he's read, all the after actions that he studied, all the leaders that he had learned of that had allowed him to be ready for that moment. Now, in hindsight, we probably all know how that turned out because General Mattis goes to pin on another 3 stars and becomes the Secretary of Defense. A few years afterwards, a reporter was interviewing General Mattis about this investigation. She was interviewing about the march to Baghdad, and she said, how did that weigh on your mind, knowing that you were under investigation while you were still responsible for leading the division into Baghdad? He said that he didn't lose a second of sleep over it because he was so confident in his decision-making abilities and everything he had done to prepare himself for that moment. Ladies and gentlemen, Marines, as we sit in this ballroom tonight and we're dressed in our dress blues and we're enjoying a much-deserved evening with our friends and our families, make no mistake, we are in that same 30-year period of our lives. The only thing is we don't get to determine when that comes to an end. We may get 30 years, we only may get 1 more day. Our job is to be ready. Just like the slogan, we're the most ready when the nation is the least ready. Because when our nation gets that call, it answers. When the United States Marine Corps gets that call, it fights. I'm proud to know that when I land on that beach, that I'll be flanked by Marines like you all. Marines from the reserve component, who for generation after generation have answered the call of the nation every single time. I know what it is that you bring to our organization. We value that. I'm proud to know you. I'm proud to share this evening with you and your unit. I hope you all have a great night. May long live the United States, and happy birthday, Marines. Rhode.
Garden Sergeant McGrortyHunter is being presented a gift as a token of our appreciation. Thank you, Garden Sergeant.